we are here with Travis. What's your last name?
Klein.
Travis Klein from Human Head Records in New York City. I asked a bunch of people online, what are some of the best record stores to go to, and top of the list for everybody was Human Head. So we've been excited to come here and check it out, and I've heard a lot about you and kind of your affinity for all sorts of music, Brazilian music especially, and that you guys have some incredible stuff in here. So just give us a little plug about what you guys do here, where you're located and all that, because I don't even know where I am.
We're in Bushwick, or they might call it East Williamsburg, Brooklyn. 168 Johnson Avenue is the spot. It's off the Montrose stop on the L. We're a secondhand record store. All of our titles that come through are, bought either from collections or walk-ins or whatever. And I think we also are pretty aggressive about trying to find collectible stuff that people are looking for.
Yep.
And I would say the stock is reflective of what's indigenous to New York, and also you mentioned the Brazilian stuff. My wife is from Sao Paulo, and it's always been something I've been interested in, and we make trips there, and we're pretty active, going back and forth, doing records both places.
That's awesome. So you guys don't carry any new stock?
It might come in secondhand. Maybe somebody bought some records that they never opened or something like this, but yeah, generally not. There's a couple of things like that are local. We stock Daptone records. They're about a mile from us, and the guys who curate the 12-inch dance section, they buy more newer stuff.
Right. That's cool. So how did you get started collecting records? When was your first time you kind of held a record and felt a connection with it or anything like that?
My family tells me they have some child photo that they can't find of me with a Thriller record that I was obsessed with. I was probably 4 at the time, had a Fisher-Price thing. But I went several years without doing anything with records or having any connection. Maybe kind of came back to me in my mid-20s. Mm-hmm. Just started kind of picking up, vinyl copies of my favorite band's stuff. But just had it kind of stored somewhere. But it wasn't, I don't know, probably maybe late 20s that I started really getting aggressive about just having a collection of secondhand stuff. Until you really dig into it, you don't even know some of these places exist. And there's definitely a couple stores locally that have been inspiration for me, that basically stores that just have things that you never thought you would see or touch, much less be able to afford. Double Decker obviously is one in Allentown, famous one. Yeah. Beautiful World in Philly was really the jumping off point for me. The owner there was also from Wisconsin, where I'm from, and we just had a connection. And he was, John is super helpful to me. We would never have probably gotten past go without him.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of record store owners are either really super helpful or just really guarded, and they don't want to give out their secrets or whatever. So it's good when you find those that'll help you out a little bit. When did you start selling records?
I was on unemployment, but I previously had worked as a warehouse manager for a giant manufacturing facility. So packing, shipping, customer service, I liked and did all that stuff in a variety of different forms. And I was just doing something to keep myself busy, and I started putting some stuff on Discogs probably a year before we had the store, and I was just kind of selling my records and trying to kind of move things and keep active and find a kind of direction. And my partner kind of gave the idea for the place. Probably would have never have thought about doing a store, but he kind of encouraged it, and we just kind of ran with it. A bad idea that happened to work out. So
how long have you guys been open?
It's just recently 6 years.
Cool. Yeah, this is a great shop. I mean, it seems like you got great psych on the walls. So you got an original Nirvana or Nevermind, and you got some good jazz and Brazilian stuff. Is that something that you kind of always liked, or when you got into records, you started digging deeper into each, into jazz and psych and all that stuff?
It's embarrassingly funny, but I was approached before we started the shop through a friend. I was approached by someone from like the IFC channel, and he was asking about records, and he asked about jazz, and I kind of scoffed him off as like, kids don't buy jazz anymore. And I just I couldn't have been more wrong. Before we started this place, I was pretty much exclusively indie rock, classic rock, listened to a lot of KEXP, but then just kind of taking on what New York has to offer. It's a lot and expansive. I had an interest in Brazilian music before the shop. I don't know, like if you're a gringo, how do you find out about that stuff? There's like one Rolling Stone list online somewhere, and then you just start listening to everything on the list and go from there, I guess. The connection between the two countries is far less than available than like anything if you want to discover from like Western Europe, something like that. So that's cool.
Yeah. So your wife being from Brazil, when did you guys meet, and when did you start getting into that culture and the music?
I was into the music and culture before I met her, but we met actually at a record show. She approached my table in maybe the first year, and we were friends for a long time, and I like just kind of passively at these different record selling events, and it just kind of happened years later. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. So she's into collecting records too?
Yeah. She's art director, and she has style and taste, and she knows a lot. It's impressive.
That's cool. Yeah. So you gotta, like my wife, she knows a good bit, and we'll go looking for records. I remember when she was pregnant with our first, I got this picture of her like this big pregnant, and just going to town digging through records. We were at a record show, but that's pretty cool. So what are some of the crazier, I know you got some, you were talking about in New York City and in Philadelphia, some of these shops that have things on the wall that you thought you'd never see. And I love like when you find something, you're like, I never thought I'd have this. What's a couple records that you found that you've just been like, I can't believe I'm holding this in my hand, Can you think of any?
I mean, it keeps growing with the store, if you like, to be very basic, Beautiful World, the first time I went in there was like, there was an original UK Please Please Me on the wall for an affordable and like, I mean, those are like, you go into a lot of crusty shops, and like a regular Sgt. Pepper is like a stupid amount of money, and like anything UK is $1 million, and to have it be affordable and hold it in my hand, wow, but like now it's, every record show. I mean, we've been blessed with several 4-digit records. We have probably by the time this goes up, we'll have posted about. We recently acquired the Os Mutantes had a first 7-inch before they were Mutantes. They were 6. They were Os Seis, and there's only 300 copies of this record. 150 of them on the way to distro were destroyed. So there's probably 10 alive in the world, something like this. It's.
Where'd you find it?
We bought it in Brazil.
Wow, gosh, that's crazy.
I've got a couple of guys who are active, and those kind of records, they pop up, but you have to be there and on it. It's very immediate because people are looking for that stuff. It's a $5,000 7-inch.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of great stuff from the country. I think a lot of dealers will end up bringing us stuff because we pay pretty well on stuff. I've had a Turner Brothers. I don't know if you know that. I mean, we can go on about obscure whatever wormhole, but it's great. I've had like we've had some acetates, and that's another world.
Yeah.
So we're blessed to be in New York, where there's a lot of records, and it just
cool. Jazz and ethnic music seems to be a lot more plentiful here than it is. We're from North Carolina, so we don't get it as much down there. But
made and bought here, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in houses. It was part of the culture. You know, I'm from Wisconsin, not around, and on the West Coast, it's even less. You know, like unless it was a transplant from here,
right?
That kind of thing.
Do you get a lot of Blue Note stuff? Is it? I would assume it's more common here because of New York City, but
I mean, you find them, but it's hard. I would say more than anything else, collectible wise. I mean, guys are coming in here pounding the Blue Notes all day. You know, like I could buy 10 complete catalogs and it's not enough. You know, like it's.
Yeah, I found a couple weeks ago. I found Hank Mobley's first Blue Note, and I was like, "That's one that was huge." I couldn't believe it. But especially down where we live, I find them every once in a while. But yeah, they're pretty tough to find. So one thing I was going to ask you about is, you know, I get a lot of people ask me in other countries if I wholesale out the records that I find, and I can't keep records in stock. I'm always looking for more. But I saw that you guys will wholesale out like whole pallets, you know, of records. Tell me a little bit about that and the process and all that. You know, what you guys do with that.
So we do a lot of expensive collectibles, but on the other side of things, you know, I would argue I would put our $2 bin up to the test with anybody's cheap bin. You know, we process in all formats about 4,000 records a week, and I mean we have turnover, and our price specific bins are pretty solid, and they're meant not only for a good deal for a consumer, but also for a resale dollar for a dealer, you know, that is looking to take this to somewhere else. Everything that, because we curate pretty hard, everything that we don't sell goes into a box that is, you know, taped up and processed by format, and we offer those in bulk to stores internationally. There's a lot of like, American rock, jazz, and soul that, you know, aren't as available, and people can buy for, you know, a fraction of a dollar, and, you know, putting $5-10 on it in somewhere else that works. You know? So yeah, it's a slow process. We have a couple of customers, but it doesn't take many. You know, we really are looking for probably 3 or 4 really good customers that it works for. We're in their interest to do it, and we have the volume. So it seems to make sense.
So do you guys have like a warehouse where you store everything, your storage or whatever?
Man, I would like to say we had a bigger space, but this is where New York becomes a problem. You know, I'm from a warehousing. I've done warehousing my whole life, so it's something that's very comfortable for me. But we have to do a lot of juggling around before we started recording. You saw me moving all the boxes. The van is essentially a third warehouse. You know, and like I had to pull out a collection that we got last week to make room for the bulk records that we have to move in and out of the store until we have room. So, and we've got a couple storage units that we utilize as much as possible, but space is a premium in New York, so it's really hard to make a leap. You know, downstairs is where we have our kind of our online store page, and we could definitely grow into 3 or 4 times that, and probably significantly grow efficiency of the people that are working down there. But, you know, life in the big city, you know.
So do you sell more online or in house?
I would say we do more in store. I would say it was, you know, 50-50 for a long time, but because of space restrictions, it's really been hard for us to grow it beyond what we currently do on a month-to-month basis, which is fine. It's an arm of it, but, you know, every week there's people that come to the store that have never been here, never heard of it before. So, you know, and our reputation's pretty positive, and and so but it just kind of comes over time, you know.
For sure. Do you have any good stories of like collections that you went to go buy, and you know, think any crazy stories? Like I've got quite a few that like, you get into a situation and the person ends up being like really crazy, or any fun stories like that?
There's always those. Probably one of the most accidentally intense stories I ever had was I was in a house in Queens, and the husband had passed, like so many of these situations are, and his wife was a 90-year-old champion bowler who never went downstairs. Like many houses in the 70s, there was a guy's like man cave in the basement where nobody else went to, and he had the couches and the carpet, and it was like the cool spot, and he had the bar, and behind the bar he had all the jazz and everything, and it was like the stuff was meticulous. It was number nor he was a I believe a Vietnam vet.
Wow.
And so he was meticulous about his stuff, and he had cool taste. And up behind the bar was like the turntable and then the receiver, and we buy equipment too. So I start trying to move the stuff, and their nephew, I think, is the person who is downstairs helping me with this, because the wife, who's 90 years old, hasn't gone down there in many years. And I'm at the top starting to move the receiver, and there's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, with my two fingers I'm like start moving this handgun that's like sitting there on top of the, like he's got two or three chilling there, and I'm like, I'm just gonna and it was like a very funny, we didn't really talk about it, but we had a very funny exchange where we're like, yeah, we're just gonna we'll buy those another time, and it was just like, whew, all right, that was that guy's life, you know what I mean? So that was pretty funny, but it was handled pretty well. There's a ton of stories of just New York individuals, man. Like you love jazz. There's multiple people that I've spoke to that lived through the period and are now selling their records, their collection, and they speak very reverently about the period they lived in. I bought a guy's, probably the best jazz collection we ever had was Around the Block, and it was a guy who lived in Harlem in the late 40s, and he talks beautifully about leaving the door open at night, and it was a beautiful household, and his dad cleaned all his records, and he's appreciative of the life he lived, being in the era that he was. He was a saxophone player himself, but just eventually chose a different path, and he's not the only person from that time period that has like just had a beautiful soul and really felt fortunate to be living in the existence of where they were,
Yeah. So what are some of the bigger collections that you bought?
Bigger in terms of volume, bigger in terms of money. I mean, we bought, I come from my previous job. I ran a warehouse facility that had 300 to 400 in and outbounds of trailers a day. It was a 1.5 million square foot beverage facility. So I really tried to apply that to just doing volume. And Beautiful World is one of the largest sellers on Discogs under Philadelphia Music, and they had, I tried to kind of apply their model. That we've been able to adjust to what works for us. But in the beginning, I was buying anything, and I was buying way too many records, and working, just working through stuff. I mean,
are you more selective now? I mean, I guess because you have to be because of the space, or it's hard. I mean, we're more selective in terms of I'll buy anything, but I also understand what I can use where. Trying to think if I've bought 100,000 piece record collections. I don't think so, but I've bought, many in the 4 or even 5 digit piece collections. Wow. Yeah, it gets to be a lot of work. People don't understand. Like I bought early on. I bought 20,000 records for $200.
Wow.
It was early on, and I didn't even want it. And so the guy's like, "What do you want? What would you offer me for it?" And I was like, "For all the work it's going to take, there's not a whole lot of good stuff in there. I gave you like $200." He's like, "Deal." I was like, "Crap." And so then I had to work for it. But a lot of people are like, "Oh man, you're so lucky," but it didn't feel lucky. That was rough.
Yeah,
really rough when you buy that many.
And what is that time taking away from records that you could actually make money on? You know, that's the real kind of factor, you know.
And it sounds like you have an appreciation for when you tell me that you and you have a reputation for being able to pay more than other people. You know, like for me, there's something about being able to have a really rare record, something that's incredible, just to have it for a little while and to pass it on to somebody who really, you know, wants it. That's a labor of love. And it sounds like you probably share that same passion as being able to just have something even for a little while.
Yeah. It's a lot better just let it pass through and keep it all going. And it comes from enough different angles. You know, it comes from something in the 12 inches. It comes from a couple 45 collection, you know, like different styles. So it keeps it going. But I also like the fact that, you know, with the volume that we do, where we're selling records for $0.25 a piece, that like I can genuinely offer someone 10 cents, and you know, through our processing, like I can pay for the labor and we can still pass it on to somebody and give it a home, you know. I tell people all the time, we're not fighting against other stores, we're fighting against the trash. You know, like people just aren't aware, and they throw out stuff all the time, and once that stuff is there, it's gone forever.
Yeah, that's true. Do you collect a lot personally? Do you have a big collection at home, or?
I keep it pretty high and tight. I tell my wife that like it's the best value for her dollar. I try to keep it under 1,000 records.
Oh wow.
Just because if it comes regularly here in the store, it's not something I want to grab it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and it's always kind of like, it's kind of one of these things that if a regular customer mentions a record and I'm like, oh, I have that, you know, I would be willing to sell it to a friend. I'm far less negotiable with those because that's, you know, from the personal vault, and if you want from the personal vault, you have to pay for it. I think that's that's fair, you know.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, if somebody wants something really bad and I haven't listened to it in a while, I'll be like, well, you know, I guess I can let it go. But I just sold my Lee Morgan Cooker original press, which was hard for me to find, but a friend of mine really wanted it, and he was going to trade me a bunch of stuff to. I'm opening the shop, and so I said, well, I guess it's his favorite album, so I'll let it go. But it's one of those things. But for me, like when I had listened to all the classic rock that I could stand and all the, you know, regular run-of-the-mill stuff, I started digging into psych and jazz and a little bit deeper into other things because I was just bored. You know, is that how you kind of got into Brazilian music, or?
Initially, there was a couple of the iconic albums that I just really loved and felt something that I couldn't articulate or explain, but I just kind of gravitated towards it. Yeah. I would say definitely, you know, being rooted in classic and indie rock, like now I just never even, I hardly touch the stuff with a guitar. Yeah. I'm more interested in like a groove that's, you know, putting everybody in a positive headspace. I feel like there's a lot of common 70s soul that's great music that's not out there even on radio anymore or any of that kind of stuff that is kind of from New York. And I've just been exposed to a lot of these guys from the Paradise Garage era that seems to be in the era of music, the demographic of people that were the most passionate about going for the ultimate in sound. And that's kind of an interesting exploration for me. That whole culture is pretty cool, and we're pretty fortunate to kind of be able to learn from those guys. So I guess that's kind of where my head is at the moment. You know, I'll play anything that's kind of like positive vibes in the shop. It's kind of where my headspace is at. It seems to be versatile, and I like turning people on from Wisconsin to it because they don't get exposed to any of that stuff, you know. Like,
when I was younger, my mom, she would turn on like Funkadelic and stuff, and like we're the whitest white family, and she just, I don't know why she loved it, but she did, and she would turn it on, and it would just turn everybody's mood around, you know. And I would be like, even now, that's this type of thing that when it's a funky beat, it's like you can't be mad. It makes you feel better. So are you a musician? You said you play guitar or no?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm just a professional appreciator.
Yeah, cool. Well, man, I appreciate you letting us come in your shop, and there's a lot of records in here that I want to look at and try not to buy, but probably we'll buy a few. So yeah, thanks for coming in early and letting us poke around.
Yeah, of course, man.
And that's Penny, right?
Yeah, that's the star of the show.
She's so chill.
Yeah, except when there's an expensive record on the table, and then she'll just kind of kick the tone arm, like it's always the fancy stuff. It's never, the $2 holler.
She's like, I'm the only fancy one up here.
Yeah, very
Cool.
much, very much.
Well, thank you, man.
Yeah, of course.